The war for the soul of video games continues to build momentum this week, with NFTs still dominating the headlines as big companies try to herd all gamers into their vision of a monopolistic Metaverse future. But with all that success, old skeletons can come out of closets, and what seemed like a good idea can turn out to be a very large millstone. Hi, I'm Rob, and welcome to Ghostly News. Now, we're going to start off with one of those skeletons that I mentioned, and it has to do with harassment in the workplace and misconduct and various things like that. All of these allegations that came out about Activision Blizzard and various other companies, well, it's a bit more endemic than people might have originally thought. See, GameIndustry.biz has done an investigation into the International Game Developers Association, who publicly criticised the industry for ignoring harassment allegations and encouraged victims to reach out to them for support. This was back in 2020. But according to Game Industry's investigation, despite the IGDA's pledge to support victims, it mishandled multiple formal complaints against its own Women in Games Special Interests Group chair and failed to follow its own policies on how to properly handle such complaints on more than one occasion. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole investigation because it is quite lengthy. I will link it in the description below. Suffice to say, though, that when you have a body that is supposed to be there to support people who are in a position where they're being harassed or mistreated at work, something like that, but they themselves are guilty of the same offences and of the same culture of not investigating and not treating things seriously, then there is a very, very, very fundamental problem with the mentality of a lot of people who work in the video games industry at a more senior level. I'm not using that to decry all developers or publishers. There are many, many, many good, hard-working people who work in video games. It just seems to be that as they progress up the ranks into the upper echelons of video games, they decide that somehow they are better than everybody else. I don't know when this caste mentality started infiltrating video games, don't know where it comes from, but it needs to be removed. Speaking of things that are getting removed, a report from Business Insider, which was published yesterday and was spotted by The Verge and Kotaku and various other news organisations, has painted a not-so-happy picture about the ending for Google's Stadia. Apparently, it's been demoted within Google, and the boss, Phil Harrison, is now reporting to the VP of Subscription Services rather than directly to Google's hardware boss. According to the report, this is characterized by insiders as a demotion for the entire Stadia service, following disappointing sales performing far below Google's expectations. But then you have to ask, what did you expect, Google? You have no cachet with gamers, you are not a bona fide video games publisher or developer. You've simply jumped on the bandwagon of how big games are, decided to make your own streaming service, hoping that the name Google will be enough to encourage people to use your service. But when there are other options, many of which are equal to, if not better than your service, it just seems like you had what on the surface looks to be a good idea, but you failed to learn the lessons of the past. You failed to learn the lessons of OnLive and Gaikai and other services like them. You failed to look at Microsoft and Sony, seeing how their streaming services were still in the fledgling phase, and you thought that you could supersede them, get the jump on them by offering something that was much better, even though it didn't work anywhere near as well as you suggested in the first place. So I suppose it's only natural that it's going to fail. It may have been a good idea on paper, but it is a millstone for Google now, and that's why they're desperately trying to make money back off it by licensing the technology under a different name to other companies like Peloton and various others. Now, according to Business Insider's report, they found a game on Peloton bikes which is actually powered by something called Google Stream, which may be the new name for Stadia. And I'll be honest, if you just called it Google Stream, you might have won more of us over. Gamers don't really like complications, we like things to be simple. But it seems like most of the big studio executives and VPs and CEOs, they don't seem to understand that. It's not rocket science, Just keep it simple. We like simple. Which is probably why a lot of us liked itch.io's response to NFTs. In a series of tweets, itch.io, the indie platform, have stated that NFTs are a scam. If you think they are legitimately useful for anything other than the exploitation of creators, financial scams, and the destruction of the planet, then we ask that you please reevaluate your life choices. Also, fuck any company that says they support creators and also endorses NFTs in any way. They only care about their own profit and the opportunity for wealth above anyone else, especially given the now easily available discourse concerning the problems of NFTs. How can you be so dense? Now, itch.io haven't stated categorically whether they'll be banning NFTs and blockchain from appearing on their platform, although given their tweet, one would expect that they would, but that's not a certainty until they say so. It's not like Valve, who last year already announced that they won't allow blockchain-based games or titles that feature NFTs onto Steam. Meanwhile, Tim Sweeney over at Epic Games welcomed blockchain and NFT games onto the Epic Games Store, provided that they follow the relevant laws, disclose their terms, and are age-rated by the appropriate group. Anyway, the subject of NFTs, like I said earlier, is one of the ones that dominates the headlines, and Krafton, the creators of PUBG, are actually getting in on the NFT bandwagon. They have entered a memorandum of understanding with NFTs to develop a new Web 3.0 and non-fungible token project, because the NFT Metaverse platform is a real thing that Krafton want. They want to develop a user generation content creation tool which will work within a high quality virtual world that they're going to build, and it's going to be the monopolistic metaverse future that all gamers should ascribe to and join in. Hallelujah! Sorry if I sound a little bit sarcastic and disgruntled by this whole thing, but I just fail to see how people can be so dense about the whole idea and about the pushback from just about everybody who isn't a CEO or corporate executive. NFTs, who are the other half of this memorandum of understanding, they are the company behind something called Zepeto, which is Asia's largest metaverse platform, social media hub network type thing. Basically, it's like IMVU or maybe Second Life or something like that. It's an app that's on your phone, you have a 3D avatar, you talk to people and connect with them, and it's also not for kids. NFTs are going to be doing the Metaverse service and its surrounding community and social media services, but they're not the only ones kind of getting in on the Metaverse act, because Bandai Namco are also wanting to do their own Metaverse, and they're investing 96 million quid into their own Metaverse to develop it and connect it to all of their numerous brands and stuff like that. I, for one, am curious how this Metaverse is going to work, because from my perspective, if you look at something like an MMO, like World of Warcraft or RuneScape or Final Fantasy XIV or even Lost Ark or something like that, they are basically metaverses in their own right. You have a bunch of people who basically connect together on what is essentially a social platform that's based inside a game, and they basically do stuff together and talk to each other and hang out and various things like that. Yeah? Fine. Fortnite, I suppose, also falls into this category. Maybe. Fine. But here's the thing. Of them all, I think that the one that's closest to what the futuristic idea of the metaverse is going to be is probably Final Fantasy XIV. Because with all the crossovers that happen in that game, with various other Final Fantasy titles, and with various other Square Enix titles, I mean, you have in there stuff from Final Fantasy XII, and you have raids designed by Yoko Taro, which are based on Nier, and have 2B and various other characters from Nier within Final Fantasy XIV. So it's more of a Square Enix metaverse kind of thing, but it's not a complete metaverse, so is it a proto-metaverse? And it's kind of a metaverse, so is it a quasi-proto-metaverse? Let's see how many prefixes we can tack on to the word metaverse just to take the piss. Please. How many can we get to? Help me out here. I've got to quasi-proto-metaverse. Add on more. Anyway, we were talking about NFTs and decrying the whole idea of NFTs, and we're going to continue doing that because, well, Ubisoft continued to bury their head in the sand about NFTs. I don't know why Ubisoft seem to think that nobody else understands NFTs but them, but whatever the case may be, they have basically decided to work with the Sandbox, which is a community-driven platform where creators can monetize voxel assets and gaming experiences on the blockchain. And they are going to be adding their Rabbids to the blockchain Metaverse, which means the Rabbids will have their own estate within the world of the Sandbox and will be able to have interactive experiences with the Rabbids. Now, I'm sorry, but telling somebody they can have an interactive experience with a Rabbid just sounds weird and ever so slightly wrong. Anyway, it's obvious that Ubisoft really don't understand anyone who has a different opinion to them when it comes to NFTs, and that includes their own staff and their own developers. They recently held another workshop aimed at specifically addressing the concerns of skeptical employees, and they also started giving out special NFTs to some members of the Ghost Recon team to celebrate the series' 20th anniversary. One developer likened it to the staff saying, "We hate this crypto stuff," and Ubisoft responding with, "Okay, come get some." And they gave away hats and stuff like that are only usable within Ghost Recon. I don't understand how a bunch of supposedly intelligent people can be so wildly off the mark, and yet somehow still fail to see that they have not only not hit the target with their idea, they've basically wound up with a lot of collateral damage and half the town is in ruins. Maybe it's because they're busy with NFTs that they don't see the forest fire for the trees. Or maybe it's because they're working on a new Assassin's Creed game, let's get the naming right, to help fill up their schedule, and apparently this one is going to be more stealth-based, so lots more sneaking around instead of running around killing anything that moves, because apparently the Muso style of gameplay for Assassin's Creed is a thing that can be done. If no one's around to see that you killed somebody, isn't that still an assassination? Apparently so. So yeah, anyway, this new game, which has the codename Rift, was originally planned as an expansion for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and it's going to feature the main character from Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which is a fellow called Basim. It won't be a massive open-world role-playing game like the previous entries, and will focus more on stealth gameplay, and it's planned for release later this year or 2023. And if they're going back to the stealth gaming type thing, then great. I think that would work for Assassins, because pardon me for maybe being a little bit stupid here, but aren't assassins supposed to be stealthy? You know, sneak in, kill the person, sneak away, able to kill one person in a crowd of thousands, that sort of thing. It suddenly strikes me that Hitman's been doing really well, and I would love to see an Assassin's Creed game that follows the Hitman mold. Maybe not set in the present or near future, like Hitman is, but something that, say, revisits some of the old locations and locales from Assassin's Creed history, but re-envisions them as a Hitman game. That would be interesting at the very least, wouldn't it? Anyway, moving on to Platinum Games, and their CEO, Atsushi Inaba, has expressed that he would like for the company to create games that can be enjoyed for longer periods of time. This was in an interview with Famitsu, which has been translated by Video Game Chronicle. Now, to clarify those points, what he wants are larger, riskier games and possibly even live service games, and he seems to suggest that their Project GG could be a live service type game. Live service is one of the current buzz terms with CEOs and corporate executives within video games. It's a term that, once it's said at any senior level corporate meeting within video games, immediately you can see the pound and dollar symbols in people's eyes as they all think, we're going to make so much money from microtransactions and from the game itself and from merchandising and all sorts of things like that. It's going to be great. It's going to be the next Apex Legends. It's going to be the next Overwatch. It's going to be this or that or the other. Yay! Hooray for live service and money! I'm not actually saying that the idea of making profit is a bad thing, and I'm not saying that the idea of a live service is a bad thing, because fundamentally, they're not. But the history of live service games within video games, just as an industry, is not a happy one, nor is it a good one. The road to live service success is littered with the corpses and ashes of numerous games and developers and publishers throughout the years. For every one successful Destiny, there will be 50 other games that tried and failed. And that's the truth of it. Live service is a minefield, and you will be lucky to get one successful IP. That's probably why, after Sony bought Bungie, they announced that they wanted 10 live service titles out by the end of March 2026. It's not that any of them are going to be successful, or that they're still going to be running by the end of March 2026. It's just that they have released 10 of them. And if they get hit out of one of them, that's a great batting average for them, at least for now. Right, it's time for our final story, and the Commonwealth Games are coming to Birmingham this year, which is going to be fun for anyone who likes athletics and various things like that. Basically, the sporty types among us. But for those of us who aren't really sporty types, we have our own sport called esports, and that is also coming to the Commonwealth Games in a pilot. So, unfortunately, medals will not be conferred to the winners, but the pilot will help them to establish whether esports can be an actual sporting event at the Commonwealth Games. And if that's the case, then it might not be long until we see esports at the Olympics. Seriously, this is no bullshit. It might not be long until we have esports at the Olympics. Okay, that's the end of the second episode of Gossip News. If you have any thoughts about any of the things that I've ranted and raved about today, then let us know in the comments below. I'll be back again with our third episode of Gossip News. Until then, thanks for watching.